Just starting the recording, but yes.
Oh, good job.
Yeah, so my name is Jessica Jensen, and I have been homeschooling for 11, 12 years, something like that now. I have two daughters. They are now 14 and 16, so we are all the way in high school, which is absolutely wild and crazy and not something I thought. It feels like it's so far away, and then all of a sudden it's here, and you're like, wow, really? Here we are. So I really love talking about narration, and fitting it into 20 minutes is going to be hard. So I shared in the chat box, I shared the notes that I have for you. It's kind of a checklist, and I'm going to go through there pretty fast and furious. I know I've kind of gotten a feel from some of the questions that we have some newer people in here. I know we have some experienced people in here, so I'm going to try to get through as much as I possibly can, but we'll see how far it goes. All right, so if I asked you to tell me about what you ate for lunch just now, or even what you did last Saturday, would you be able to tell me about it? You can just nod your heads or... Yes, you would, right? Being able to tell is a natural innate ability that we are all born with. Storytelling is a natural gift that is given to us by God, who is the original storyteller. We are all image bearers of God, and therefore we have an innate ability to tell stories. Telling, is what narration is, telling. So Charlotte Mason says, narrating is an art like poetry making or painting because it is there in every child's mind, waiting to be discovered, and is not the result of any process of disciplinary education. A creative fiat calls it forth. Let him narrate, and the child narrates, fluently, copiously, in ordered sequence, with fit and graphic details, with a just choice of words, without verbosity or tautology, which just means saying a thing twice in different words, so soon as he can speak with ease. This amazing gift with which normal children are born is allowed to lie fallow in their education. Bobby will come home with a heroic narrative of a fight he has seen between Duke and a dog in the street. It's wonderful. He has seen everything, and he tells everything with splendid vigor in the true epic vein. But so ingrained is our contempt for children that we see nothing in this but Bobby's foolish, childish way. Whereas here, if we have eyes to see and grace to build, is the ground plan of his education. So what is narration, and why should we practice it? So in its most simple term and its most simple form, narration is telling back. It's speaking and writing what we know. Okay, but it's also an art to be practiced. We can develop and refine the natural God-given ability. An example of this would be singing. We're all, those of us who are born with a voice, we are born with the ability to sing. Now, there are people who will take singing and they will practice it. They will have a voice coach, or they will spend years in a choir or a choral group, and they spend years practicing that gift. Those people are going to have a greater ability because they have practiced that gift. They have honed that gift. Narration is the same way. We are all born with the ability to tell, but when we use narration in our children's education, we give them the opportunity to refine and to grow in that ability. So narration is also an exercise that helps our minds to digest the food at hand. It's an outward expression of an inward process. Okay, so when we're eating, if we look at this example of digestion, when we're eating, we're going to prepare our food, we're going to cut it into little bites, we're going to chew it properly, right? We're going to rest while we digest it, because if we just go out and start running a 5K, we're probably going to throw it up, right? And then it's not going to nourish our body. So narration is the same way. It's helping you to digest the food of the mind. So in a Charlotte Mason education, the food of the mind would be things like living books, picture study, nature study, all the food that the children take in that they need to digest. So Karen Glass says, When any of us have to think about something thoroughly enough to be able to relate it to someone else, we are making that bit of knowledge a bit of ourselves and our experience. When we have to tell something back, there's something that happens. There's a lot of processes that happen in our minds that helps to make that a bit of ourselves. And if we had more time, I would totally have you guys practicing this. And you would see very quickly that what looks on the outside like something that is such a simple little practice is actually quite challenging in a lot of ways. So narration is also an exercise that builds the intellectual habits of attending, apprehending, ordering, and understanding. So these are all habits of the mind that are being practiced during narration. Karen Glass says, at its heart, narration is a relationship building exercise. When we lift narration out of its everyday context and use it as an educational method. Oh, sorry, I had to let somebody in and then I poked the wrong thing. Where was I? When we use it as an educational method, we are giving each pupil narrator the opportunity to create, build, or strengthen his relationship with knowledge. The relationship develops on several levels. The child forms his own relationship with the material he is narrating, and as his relationships become broader and deeper, he begins to perceive the relationships that exist within knowledge itself. The first step towards personal acquaintance with knowledge become the first steps toward higher level thinking skills. So narration is a relationship building exercise. The child is building relationships with the knowledge. They're building relationships between the things that they know in their mind, past and present. And this is how we move them towards higher level thinking skills. In the Parents Review, which was a publication that Charlotte Mason edited some time ago, G. Armitage Smith, Esquire, said in an article he wrote, "Knowledge has been said to consist largely in relationing. By this is meant that to know an event is to know it in all its bearings, in its relation to other events in time, place, and circumstance, to know the causes and effects in the sequences of which it forms a part, and to be able to put it in its true place in the complex series of which it may be only a small item." So as you can see, there's a lot happening in the mind while we are asking for narrations. Narration is an exercise that builds memory. Things that are narrated are going to be remembered because they are properly digested. Narration is also a way of showing gratitude for the feast that is spread before us. In the attention that we need to give to it, in the recognition of it, we're showing our gratefulness for this feast. And narration is also the foundation of composition and oratory skills. So what are some principles of narration? Narration must be done with high quality books. In a Charlotte Mason education, we would call these living books. The food of the mind is ideas. So living books are going to be full of ideas for the mind to chew on. Narration is most effective if the material is read attentively only once before narrating. This, again, Brenda talked about this a little bit this morning, this habit of attention, okay? We're gonna help develop that with narration. And so that's why Charlotte Mason says, only once are you to read it before you're narrating. Now, this doesn't mean that there's a ban on rereading. She is not against rereading. It only applies to the practice of narration. So once your child has narrated something, they can go off and read that book 12 more times if they want to. It's totally fine. She's not against rereading. There is no quizzing or interrupting. This is really hard for us. The student needs to share what they know, and we need to respect that. They're going to share what captured their imagination and what was important to them. It's not about what captured our imagination or was important to us. Narration is imprinting on their soul and not ours, okay? When we narrate something that we've read, that's our work. When they're narrating something that they have read, That's their work. It's the work of their mind. Okay, but what if they made a mistake or they left out something really important? Well, they may be corrected or completed by either another student or sibling or a teacher after they're finished. So if they made like some really big mistake, you can correct that afterwards. But remember to always do it gently. Okay, we have to go back and remember children are born persons. They are not robots. They are going to have bad days. We have bad days and we expect understanding when we're not on top of our game every day. And so we have to show our children that same respect. And that is really going to show up a lot in narration. So we can't expect them to have the exact same high quality narration every single day. They're going to struggle, and we need to remember to respect that. Narration should always be the child's own work. Okay, Charlotte Mason said, self-education is the only possible education. The rest is mere veneer laid on the surface of a child's nature. When a child narrates, so a veneer is something that's just put on the outside of something, right? But when a veneer can be easily stripped away, right? So when I think of a veneer, I think of, you know, when you're in school and you have an exam and you cram, right? You cram for that exam and you take that exam and then boop, off comes the veneer and you don't remember any of that stuff ever again. But when they're narrating and they're making those connections in their mind, that can't come off so easily, right? They're connected, okay? And so self-education, those things that where they are taking the responsibility for it, those are the things that are gonna stick, okay? Connections in the mind can't be stripped away so easily like a veneer. Narration should periodically review past material. This helps to develop a long recall. And you will notice, I have a middle school class that I teach, and I know every week when I am in the history portion, because my class last year was all girls and none of them super loved history. So I knew when I asked, I would start discussions with kind of open-ended questions that were like a narration prompt. I knew exactly who narrated which chapters because they were the ones who could talk about that chapter again. And if they hadn't narrated that chapter, they'd neglected to do that, they'd already forgotten a lot of it and they had to be reminded. So narration should periodically review the past material. It's going to help develop that long-term memory. All right, how do I teach narration? Well, oral narration starts at age 6 in a Charlotte Mason education. If we had more time, we would read a fable, and I would ask you to orally narrate so that you could see how the process works for yourself. So we don't have time today, but if you want to practice that at home, give it a try. They're going to start by telling back. Okay. You're going to start with something really short. So I mentioned a fable. That's a great place to start. Some of Aesop's fables are very, very short. They're a good place to start. Or if you're doing something else, maybe just a few sentences, a super short paragraph, something like that. Their first efforts are going to be short and they're going to be fairly simple, perhaps. Or maybe you have a child who's detail-oriented and they're going to talk for 10 minutes about something that took you 2 minutes to read. That's totally possible. I have one of those that did that. You never know where the child's going to be at, but it's fun to start hearing what comes back out. So be patient. Those first narrations are going to be short, but they are going to grow over time with practice. Modeling helps the student to understand what narration is. And it also helps you to understand the process of the mind and the challenge that narration truly is. So you can't just say, okay, it's time for you to narrate. They probably will be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So model narration for them. Read a story, narrate it back out loud together. Narrate small portions at first and then build as the student is able to keep the quality high. So the goal is to grow in the length of the things that they can narrate, but to go slowly enough that they can keep the quality of their narration high. So they don't just start dropping huge chunks of what you read. Okay, so you want to make sure you keep that quality high. Be consistent. Narration is a long process. the building of intellectual habits takes a long time. Excuse me. It takes time. It takes time to build those intellectual habits. So much of what Charlotte Mason talks about is habits, and I just have found it to be so true over and over and over again. You're building habits, whether it's, habits of shutting doors and picking up shoes, or it's habits of the mind. They're all very, very important. So be consistent, keep at it. You're going to have bad days. Just be patient. Oral narration can also be used in creative ways in a class or in a group of students. So that's something that you could do later down the road when they're a little more comfortable with it. But in the beginning stages, I would just stick to kind of doing it one-on-one with them. So when they're around the age of 9 or 10 and they're comfortable with oral narration and they're doing a really nice job with that, you're going to add the skill of written narration. I want to make sure I make a point of this. You are adding a skill. You are not leaving one behind. Students will continue to orally narrate all throughout their education. So you're going to start small. You're going to start with a sentence or two once a week for written narration. Fluency in oral narration won't necessarily translate to fluency in written narration right away. Okay, so if you have a child who orally narrates long, long, long passages, and then you ask them to do written narration and you put a pen or pencil in their hand, they might cry. I have one of those. It's a different skill. It's a different skill getting your thoughts out of your mouth and getting your thoughts out of your hands. It's just a different skill. And so a lot of people will kind of panic when they see that it's not translating. Don't fret. You will get there. This is a different skill and you're starting back at the beginning. So keep up the oral narration, start adding the written narration, and you're going to see it grow over time. So you're going to build gradually with written narration until your student is writing 150 to 300 words every day. This is generally a 3 to 4 year process. So this takes time. It just takes time and consistency. Allow your students to read their narrations to you. So when a student can hear their narration, a lot of times they will self-correct. They will catch things because oral narration is their comfort zone, right? They have practiced that for much longer than they have written narration. And so when they read it aloud, they're going to catch all kinds of things that they missed when they wrote it. In my writing classes, that's the first thing I have students do when it comes to self-revision. I'm like, read it aloud to yourself because you will catch all kinds of things that are going on there. And that allows them to self-correct, and you don't have to do the correcting, which is better for their education and better for your relationship usually too. So this is a biggie, and this is hard for a lot of moms. Do not correct written narrations, okay? Your goal here is fluency. Your goal here is for them to get their thoughts out of their head onto paper. This is not about grammar and mechanics. You want to make sure that you're freeing up your student and not freezing them up. A lot of times when you focus on grammar and mechanics, students will think, I don't know how to write. I can't write. And it totally freezes them up because they're so worried about getting the thoughts in their head out correctly, right? And so then they can't do it. It's a stumbling block for them. So we want to make sure that we remove that. We're not correcting written narrations. And again, this is a 3 to 4 year process. So for 3 to 4 years, you are not correcting their narrations. You're just letting them get those words on paper. You're going to encourage them to write longer, more complete narrations over time. And then after they are comfortable, somewhere probably around the midpoint, or maybe not even till towards the end of this stage, you will introduce a few basic mechanics, but you have to be very careful to make sure those are not the focus of written narration. Okay, so you're going to basic mechanics like capital letters at the beginning of a sentence, punctuation at the end. Keep it simple. Okay, don't make it a stumbling block. Oh, it's already 1:23. All right, this last stage is, it's not purely narration, but I kind of want to cover it a little bit. This is about crossing that bridge from narration to composition, and this is where a lot of people get really freaked out, and I actually really enjoy this. I think it's a lot of fun to watch this start to happen. So when they get about the age 12 or 13, they're comfortable with the written narration, they're writing 150 to 300 words daily, you're going to introduce beginning composition. Okay, we'll do this through introducing writing as a craft. Okay, look at different styles, look at different forms, show them that there's, you know, the different types of writing and what it can look like. And then you'll translate that to their narration practice. So you'll study and practice different types of narration. Narrative narrations are what they're going to be most comfortable with and most familiar with. They'll have been doing lots and lots of that for years. You'll move into things like expository writing and descriptive writing and even some creative narrations, which is not creative writing. It's a little bit different. You're still writing about what was in the book, you're just presenting it in a more creative way. Some kids have a lot of fun with those, but Charlotte Mason and Karen Glass both say, don't let that be a stumbling block. Creative narrations are not a requirement. They are a fun addition for some students. So you're going to teach them self-revision skills. Revisions are a way of life for writers. And a lot of students feel like if they have to revise it, then they did it wrong. And you want to make sure to remove that idea. Revisions are a way of life. So I cite a professional writer when I introduce this concept. I really like the first chapter of this book on writing well. He talks about how many times he revised this book. It was more than once or twice. Okay, it was a lot. And so it's not just them taking my word for it, it's them taking a professional writer's word for it. And so then the other thing with revisions is I let students choose which narrations they revise, because sometimes they wrote one and they adore it and they love it and they have this emotional attachment to it exactly the way it is. They don't want it to change. And so by asking them to choose, you know, one narration a week that they're going to self-revise, that allows them to leave those things alone that they don't want to touch, and maybe work on another one that they're open and willing to. And that helps get that sensitivity out of the way a little bit, because we experience that a lot with our students where they're sensitive because our writing is a personal thing. When you give feedback at this stage, you are going to give it related to the content. Okay, you're not, again, we're not focusing on the grammar and mechanics. We're focusing on the content. So the way that I like to do this is, instead of saying, I wish you would have told me something more about this, or I don't know, instead of it being a directive, I try to ask generative questions that help them to fill out the story. So if they talked about like a certain place and they just kind of plopped you there and you know nothing about it or where it is or why it's important, I might ask questions like that. Where is this place? How does it relate to this story? Okay, something like that to help them fill out. I also will frequently ask them to just imagine that the reader has no idea what you're writing about. They are completely ignorant of it. And so you have to situate them in place and time and give them background. And who is this other character that you just dropped in here? Like, who is that? And how are they related to this? So questions like that, just to help them generate that content on their own. So it's not my words. It's not the teacher's words. It's the student's words and their creation. Notice good writing. One of the ways that Charlotte Mason encourages this is by keeping a commonplace notebook where you would write down quotes or different passages that really caught your attention for both meaning and also just quality of writing. Like maybe you just like that play of words that the author used. Read good books about the art of writing. Like I mentioned, On Writing Well is one that Karen Glass recommends. And I think it's on Ambleside too, on one of the years. William Zinsser, the author of On Writing Well, says, good writing has an aliveness that keeps the reader from reading one paragraph to the next. And it's not a question of gimmicks to personalize the author. It's a question of using the English language in a way that will achieve the greatest clarity and strength. This is the advantage that narration has as preparation for composition. Your student is going to have spent years developing their own writing voice. It's not going to be stilted. It's not going to sound like some stiff outline, okay? They're going to have an idea from reading these living books what good writing sounds like, and now they're developing their voice through narration. So this is a huge advantage that we have in using narration in preparation for composition. Study what others have done with the form that you want to write. So if you want to write essays or reports or poetry, study the form and imitate. One way that you can move your narrations, you'll notice over time written narrations will get longer and they will almost turn into an essay all on their own. At this point, you can ask your student to reverse outline one of their narrations and then kind of expand that a bit and turn it into an essay or story or whatever they want to do. I found with my class, by the time we got to the point where we were reverse outlining narrations, they were almost writing an essay already. And so it was a huge relief for them because they hear that, you know, that word essay and they get really nervous. But it was a huge relief for them to realize, I actually already know how to do this. So narration really prepares them well to do those things. You can expand outlines into longer formats such as essays and stories. And then number one rule is we keep narrating both orally and written even after students begin formal composition. So it never ends. We're always narrating. We're always asking our students to interact with the feast and to tell it back to us. So that was really fast and I totally went over, but there we go. That was a brief way through the principles and the practice.
Good job. Thank you, Jessica. I know it's hard to squeeze everything in a short time.
Yeah. If I had more time, I have all these like, oh, I'd make you do this and I'd make you do that.
Right.
Practice it.
Round
Because
two.
you really learn well by practicing it. So, yeah.
Round 2 next time.
Yes.
Well, I'm hoping to do these we could do these like every 6 months or something to keep encouraging along the year and not just an annual type thing. So go into depth with kind of the stuff. So that'd be kind of neato to do that. So, all right. Does anybody have any questions for Jessica? You can type them out or unmute yourself. I need to figure out who, I don't know if you can unmute yourself, but there's one that I've been meaning to ask. It's a phone number. It's a 208-818 number. You can type in or unmute yourself so I can know who you are. That would be wonderful. Diana, I don't know if you can see in the chat window before you logged on. It shows you previous, but Jessica posted the document up above, but we can also post it in the event. So you have the document too.
I'll go share it in the event as well.
Okay.
I wasn't able to see it in the chat window. I'm sorry.
Okay.
If
we'll
you came in, yeah, if you could scroll up and if it's not there, maybe because you're on a phone, that's possible. I'll share it in the event group and then everybody can definitely have it. Okay, I see one. Should narration be done immediately after reading or can it be done later in the day? The best practice is to do it right after reading when it's still fresh so they don't forget it. Yeah.
I think it's fun. Like my kids, sometimes they'll narrate back and then later they'll be acting out the story in their free play, which is really fun to see. Or, repeating stuff, lines or something. It's kind of fun. So you never know how it'll play out later.
Yeah.
So, any other questions for Miss Jessica? I still was trying to figure out, I guess can I message? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out who the 208 number is. It's okay. They haven't gotten rid of us yet, so they must enjoy what we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
She will be around for questions too. Jessica is very smart. She's got lots of wisdom and experience and stuff, and so we're very thankful to have her here and share with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now, well, of course. Let's see. It feels really weird to have these headphones on because I feel like I'm in a tunnel right now. And I don't like it, but it is what it is at the moment. Or I'm going to have to hide somewhere and then I'm going to end up having spotty internet probably. So I didn't really get into the order of all this stuff. Miss Allison, are you ready to take 10 minutes to show how you do stuff? All right. Miss Allison does our nature study and stuff in our co-op. She's amazing. So she is going to share how she does Charlotte Mason at home. So take it away, Miss Allison.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm Allison. I have 7-year-old twin girls, and I have a 20-year-old, and I did